Stanford running back Christian McCaffrey stole the show in the 102nd Rose Bowl. Stanford routing Iowa 45-16. All three of us predicted a Stanford win. Bill, did you think it would be by this much?
I thought they'd win easily. I got a little scared, a little tentative. Kind of been burned by USC, burned by UCLA, so I didn't go as big. But Stanford clearly was a better team. Iowa clearly a Big Ten pretender, Big Ten power with air quotes around that. They're not. The Big Ten's not what the conference said that people say it is. And Stanford, they blew them away. And Christian McCaffrey, this is my 15th Rose Bowl. I've covered 15 Rose Bowls. It's the greatest single performance I've ever seen in the Rose Bowl, bar none. He was unbelievable.
Mike, let's start with McCaffrey's first touchdown. Obviously, that 75-yard pass play from Kevin Hogan, and then later in the game, he returned a punt for a touchdown. Have you ever seen anything like it?
Well, this is my first Rose Bowl, and that's the greatest performance I've ever seen in a Rose Bowl, to be honest. That first play was so impressive. I mean, it was a really simple little curl pattern. McCaffrey coming out of the backfield, Hogan hit him right in stride, sliced through two defenders, and once this kid finds open space, it's pretty clear what's going to happen. And then the punt return, I think, was a real backbreaker. I forget the player in the Iowa team, number 43. He faked.
Josie Jewell.
Josie Jewell was not a jewel on that play. He was literally grasping at air, and I can only imagine what it's like to try to corral this kid on a regular basis. He's so elusive and just a really impressive performance.
Every time McCaffrey touched the ball, oohs and ahs from the press box, which is normally a working area with no reaction at all. But perhaps the even bigger awe came when Kevin Hogan faked a fumble and then threw a touchdown pass. David Shaw said that's been a play 6 years in the works.
Well, actually, McCaffrey was part of that play, too, because he played dead. He acted like he was going to recover the fumble. They got up and threw it for a touchdown. That was just David Shaw. What got into David Shaw? I mean, he's Mr. Conservative, but I think it's interesting that local fans will note, and Lindsey looked up the stat, we confirmed it, that Christian McCaffrey this year against Southland teams, USC and UCLA, has gained a total of 1,079 all-purpose yards. 1,000. That's unbelievable against those two teams. Unbelievable. And what's more unbelievable, the most important number I wrote in my column for tomorrow's LA Times, LATimes.com, is the number 2. He finished second in the Heisman Trophy. How did he not win the Heisman Trophy ahead of the running back for Alabama? How did he not win that?
Bill, that's the question. How did he not win that?
Well, it's because the problem is Derrick Henry's games are all shown on prime time or early Saturday afternoon. 7 of Stanford's 13 games this year were shown at 10 p.m. or later on the East Coast, and that's where the biggest Heisman voting block is. That's a horrible TV deal struck by the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is such a weak position in their TV deals. That's what happened. So really, people didn't see Christian McCaffrey. Today they saw him. Today I'm getting tweets from all over the country. This is the greatest player. This is the greatest player. I'm saying yes. Hello. He's been the greatest player all year.
In fact, Reggie Bush's name was trending on Twitter because of people comparing Christian McCaffrey to Bush. Now, Mike, obviously you're around post-game to talk to some Iowa players, some Stanford players. What was the reaction you gathered?
There was a lot of, I don't know what you call, some little bit of anger in the Stanford locker room, believe it or not. They were a little offended by some of the comments coming out of Iowa this week. Desmond King saying he's going to pancake Joshua Garnett, and several Iowa players said they hadn't really heard of McCaffrey until the Heisman show, which to me is stunning. You know, that's like saying, guys in the East Coast don't know who Mike Trout is. I mean, this kid's the best player in college football. So they were a little motivated by that. And in terms of the Heisman, I think Garnett said it best. It's criminal that this kid didn't win the Heisman.
However, I will say, in speaking of Reggie Bush, Christian McCaffrey's parents do get their own house. It is Ed McCaffrey, the former Super Bowl great, 3-time Super Bowl champion Denver Broncos. So, yes.
And finally, David Shaw, when asked if the college football playoff should have more than 4 teams, well, he stood by the message that he's given all season, that it always should, regardless of how Stanford did. Obviously, Stanford would love to go on this season after routing Iowa. But, Bill, what do you think? The college football playoff, more than 4 teams?
Well, yeah, definitely these 8 teams. But Stanford, they can't complain. Before you complain, you beat Northwest. You got to beat Northwestern there, and then you don't fumble. Hogan can't fumble 3 times against Oregon and lose to Oregon. So Stanford put themselves in this position. They had nobody to blame but themselves. But yes, there needs to be 8 teams because of games like this. You see where teams 4 through 8 are pretty good, and Stanford and Ohio State would be one of those teams. Oregon might be one of those teams. Ole Miss is playing great now. There's a lot of good teams out there, 8 teams would be perfect.
So that's going to do it for us from the 102nd Rose Bowl. Again, Stanford annihilates Iowa 45-16. With Plaschke and DG, I'm Lindsey Thiry for the Los Angeles Times.